Hi, welcome to this video, and in this video we're going to be reporting some testing that we've been doing on some hot sauces. So I've got a quick picture of Xperience up here, and that's going to be one of the hot sauces that's in our competition today. So we took 3 hot sauces, and we brought them into our facility, and we've been testing them on the FoodSense Generation 4. FoodSense Generation 4 is sometimes colloquially called a Scoville meter, and it's a way of measuring the hotness of sauces, chili powders, oils, etc. Now we want to rank these 3 sauces in terms of first, second, and third, but I am going to give a bit of a background on hot sauces and Scoville heat unit and what's called dry and wet weight. But then we will actually finish by reporting the results of testing these 3 sauces, as I say, on the FoodSense Generation 4. So let me go forward a little bit and just talk about dry weight and wet weight. So I know the Carolina Reaper, and there's also another famous one, the Pepper X. Carolina Reaper has a Scoville heat unit of about 2.2 million. Now I want to be really clear about this. When people report that Scoville heat unit of 2.2 million, they think it's the pepper. With a pepper, when it's fresh and it's full of moisture, that it's 2.2 million. No, when you report those kind of records, actually what they're reporting upon is the desiccated or dry chili. So when you've driven off all the water from that chili, then and it's a dried up pepper, then at which point then it has a Scoville heat unit of 2.2 million. When the pepper is fresh and full of water, it's actually got a hotness of 220,000 Scoville heat unit. So when you see people, eating chilies and they eat the whole thing, they eat lots and lots of them. So it's, I think it's a horrible experience. But those chilies may have an actual Scoville heat unit. If they're fresh, if they've been dried, etc., they'll be hotter. But when they're fresh, they'll have, for example, 220,000 Scoville heat units. It's only when you've driven off all the water and essentially condensed the capsaicin in the material that's left that you get to this 2.2 million Scoville units. This will become significant in a little bit. Now, this is not just me saying this, but in fact, chili does have about 88%, you could call it almost 90% water in it. As you dry it down, as I say, the capsaicin concentration goes up because you're driving off the water, but the capsaicin is basically just enriching within that sample. And this kind of testing has been done where you'll take a fresh chili, and for example, it'll have a Scoville heat unit of about 48,000. Theoretically, if you dry that down, it should end up with a Scoville heat unit of about 405,000 Scoville heat units. In measuring it, in fact, you end up with a Scoville heat unit of 415,000 Scoville heat units, and that's just a difference of 2% between theory and practice. And within experimental measurement, it's almost spot on, let's say. Now, when you're talking about how hot are chili sauces, if you're preparing chili sauces and you're only using the peppers, there is a theoretical limitation to how hot they can actually be. So people who kind of are using principles of being organic and not necessarily adding extra powder or crystals of capsaicin or oils, then there's a theoretical limit to how hot these sauces actually can be. So if we take the Xperience, for example, it's got 91% Pepper X in it. So what does that mean? It means if I make up a pretend ingredients, because I don't know the absolute, in fact I could read it on the side of the bottle, but it doesn't matter really because everything else is just 9%, but 91% of this product is chili. What does that mean? It means that if you then essentially put it with the garlic, the water, the vinegar, the sugar and the salt, you will end up, if those chilies are fairly fresh, you will end up with a Scoville heat unit of about 236,000 Scoville heat units. The reason I think this is important is because I think people are basing the idea of how hot products like this will be based on 91% of 2.6, 2.7 million, but it's not. It's actually, that's because they're assuming the dry weight is the same as the wet weight, and they're not understanding that when you use a fresh chili, in fact, it's about 1/10 of the, let's say, recorded Guinness Book of World Records score, because in fact that was done on a desiccated, dried down chili. So we've got this theoretical sort of limitation unless you add in extra material like powder, or you add in extra material like crystals, of about 236,000 Scoville heat units. Now there is actually a discrepancy between theory. So for any chili sauce, you can actually calculate ahead of time. As long as you measure the chilies that go into that sauce, you can calculate ahead of time the expected hotness or the theoretical hotness of that chili sauce. But then there is a discrepancy between expected and what you actually get. And that's because capsaicin is not this inert molecule. What you are doing is you're kind of heating it, you're putting it with salts, you are putting it with pH in the terms of vinegar. And so there are several groups on the capsaicin that can be either oxidized or undergo bond breakage, which we sometimes call lysis. We've got this alcohol group here. You can call it a phenol because it's on an aromatic ring. We've got this methoxy group here. And we've got this alkene group here. You can do additions across alkene groups like that. I got this suspicion about this amide bond up here, this NH group with this C double bond O. And we've got this kind of reactive aryl center here. So there are places which can undergo degradation during the processing of the chilies and the making of the sauces. And it's no criticism. Anyone who's making sauces, this is going to happen. And so what that means is that you come in with a theoretical expectation, but actually the processes will diminish the capsaicin unless you want to then sort of augment it by adding in extra powders and extra chili pure capsaicin. I don't really recommend either thing, let's say, especially the pure capsaicin. It could be fairly dangerous. But that said, so there will be a discrepancy between what we can calculate based on the incoming hotness of the chili pepper and what we actually measure, because the capsaicin is not immune to the processes going on in making that particular sauce. And so you could have this kind of rough idea. About 263,000 Scoville units is probably the maximum limit for a sauce only made from the chili peppers and not augmented with extra capsaicin. We did measure everything on the FoodSense Generation 4. FoodSense Generation 4 is sometimes kind of called online the Scoville meter. But this is what we've been measuring it on, and these are the chili sensors. You put the sample on there and you get a result. In fact, I've got the meter talks to the phone gets the result from the meter, and you get what's called, you get the Scoville heat unit on your phone. We do have much more detailed videos about that. In fact, there's a link there as well. So talking about unique garlic. So unique garlic, we've recorded it 5 times. We like to do a few measurements because chili sauces can be quite heterogeneous. It's not like the capsaicin is necessarily evenly distributed throughout the sauce. This is made from a natural product, so it can be quite heterogeneous. So we've done 5 measurements on it. Again, on the FoodSense, we got a score of 32,000, 33,000, 32,000, 30,000, and 32,000. So on average, it's 32,000, but we've also looked at something called the relative standard deviation. This is kind of our certainty. When you're dealing with products made from natural products like chilies, you want to kind of understand what's the spread in my data, because the product, as I say, is essentially heterogeneous. What's at the top of the bottle may not be the same at the bottom of the bottle. Why does everyone shake it when they first start? People understand this kind of settling phenomena. Anyway, so we were happy enough with the repeatability of our results. Xperience came in and tested it again on the FoodSense Generation 4. Tested it 5 times, 94,000 approximately, 83,000, 101,000, 93,000, and 93,000. The power of this is that because of the FoodSense Generation 4, it's not like one test, and that's it. No, we test it quite a few times to make sure that, we don't just have what's sometimes called an outlier, but we've tested it 5 times and we have an average of 93,000, which we're quite happy with. And again, our repeatability of test is good. It's kind of 7%. So, I'm happy with that. The last one to be tested was Apollo. We again tested it on the FoodSense. We tested it 5 times. We got a score of 83,000, 107,000, 114,000, 110,000, 107,000. And that gave us a relative standard, first of all, gave us an average of about 104,000 and a relative standard deviation of 12%. So anything better than 20 is usable. Anything better than 15 is good. And so I was quite happy with a relative standard deviation of 12%. So we've tested 3 sources. I think one of them, the first one, Garlique, came in about 32. Obviously, Xperience came in about 93, and this one's coming in at 104. But they've all got good relative standard deviations or good repeatability. So said we were going to put them on a podium, so we have a sort of first, second, and third place. So in third place, it's no criticism of its flavour or its quality, but Unique Garlic in terms of Scoville heat unit was in third at about 32,000, I think. Xperience came in, its absolute average, I should say, was 93,000, and then top of the league here was Apollo, that came in at about 104,000. But there was actually an appeal at the last minute by Xperience, because we were gathering 5 data points for each one. We were actually able to do what's called a t-test on it. Now, t-tests, ironically, were invented by a guy called William Seeley Gossett, and he published this in about 1908. And he actually published it for he worked in the Guinness factory at the time in Ireland, essentially making Guinness. And he invented a way of looking at data and saying, are these two numbers different, or actually are they the same? And so when we look at all our data for Xperience and all of our data for Apollo, we actually find out that they're not statistically significantly different. So what this means is, even though one of them was 93,000 and one of them was 104,000, they both had a bit of uncertainty associated with them. And so we couldn't actually say which one was the hottest with the five each measurements that we did. So in fact, we made them joint first. So if you've got any questions regarding really the science of chili sauces and chilies, or the use of FoodSense Generation 4, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, thanks very much.